Retired war dog doesn't recognize his former veteran until a scary moment changes everything. The sun was beginning to set over the Arizona mountains, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. Jack Reynolds, a 37-year-old veteran, walked slowly toward the city's animal shelter. His worn boots clicked on the asphalt, a reminder of the weight of every step he had taken in life since leaving the Army 2 years ago. Have you ever visited an animal shelter? How was your experience? He was trying to find something to fill the void, but there was a gap that no amount of work or therapy seemed to heal. Rex, your loyal German Shepherd, the war dog who has been by your side on dangerous missions, has been forced to retire after an injury. The shelter was small and simple, with rusty fences and makeshift houses for the dogs. The smell of disinfectant hung in the air, mixed with the sound of scattered barking. Have you ever thought about adopting a pet? What would motivate you to make this decision? Jack was there at the request of his older sister, Emily, who believed a dog could help him deal with the traumas of post-war life. He hesitated, but something inside him pushed him to take that step. As I walked through the narrow corridors, I observed each cage with a critical eye. Some dogs barked excitedly, wagging their tails in an attempt to attract attention. Others just watched him silently, their eyes filled with melancholy. None of them, however, seemed to have that special spark he associated with Rex. Do you think pets have a special connection with their owners? Tell us an experience you had with a pet. Did you like this exciting story? Subscribe to the Stories That Touch the Soul channel to follow this journey of overcoming and friendship. Jack stood in front of the cage, unable to look away. Rex, the German Shepherd who once exuded energy and determination, now seemed a shadow of the dog he knew. His eyes, once full of life, were now dark and distant. The scars on his back paw and one of his ears were visible marks from the battlefield, but there was something more, an invisible wound that Jack knew well, for it carried the same kind of pain. He's been through a lot, the employee explained in a low voice. He was found in a smaller shelter in another state. It appears he was abandoned by someone who couldn't handle him. He suffers from anxiety and doesn't trust humans easily. She paused, looking hesitantly at Jack. Do you know him? Jack nodded slowly, his voice coming out in a barely audible whisper. He was my partner, my best friend. For a moment, he was lost in a rush of memories. The grueling training where they both learned to trust each other, the risky missions, where Rex had saved his life more than once, and the nights when the dog was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. And now, here he was in front of Rex, and the dog had no idea who he was. The employee carefully opened the cage. Rex watched but didn't move. Jack slowly knelt, holding out his hand. Hey buddy, it's me, Jack. His voice was shaking, but he kept it smooth. Rex tilted his head slightly as if trying to understand, but remained still, his muscles tense. Jack felt a lump in his throat. He knew this would not be an easy process. Would you like to spend some time with him? We can take him to the playground, the employee suggested, trying to ease the tension in the air. Jack nodded without hesitation. In the courtyard, the scene was not much different. Rex kept his distance, sniffing the air but avoiding any direct interaction. Jack watched every movement, trying to understand what the dog was feeling. As the sun sank below the horizon, Jack made a decision. He looked at the female employee and said firmly, I'll take you home. No matter how long it takes, I'll bring you back. There was determination in his voice, an echo of the loyalty they shared in the past. He knew that, like Rex, he also needed to be rescued, and maybe this was the beginning for both of them. The journey to Jack's house was marked by an uneasy silence. Rex lay down in the back of the truck, resting on a blanket Jack had laid out for him. The German Shepherd kept his eyes fixed on the window, avoiding any eye contact. Jack looked in the rearview mirror every now and then, trying to decipher what was going on in the dog's mind. It was hard not to feel rejected, but he also knew that, as veterans, they both carried invisible scars. When they got home, Jack parked in the driveway of his small property on the outskirts of town. The house was simple, surrounded by a large yard with a few trees swaying gently in the wind. He opened the truck door and called for Rex, but the dog hesitated. After a few seconds, he slowly descended, taking cautious steps. Each movement was meticulous, as if he was constantly assessing his surroundings. Jack led Rex to the front door, opening it carefully. "Welcome to your new home, boy," he said, trying to sound cheerful, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty. Rex entered, but remained standing at the entrance, sniffing the air cautiously. He looked suspicious, as if he expected something unexpected to happen at any moment. Determined to create a comfortable space, Jack had prepared an area in the corner of the living room with a new bed, food and water bowls, and some toys he bought on the way home. "This is your place, Rex," he said, pointing to the corner, but the German Shepherd stayed where he was, ignoring the invitation. Jack sighed, feeling the frustration starting to take its toll. As he prepared something to eat, Jack couldn't help but remember the days when Rex would run to him full of energy and loyalty. That dog was different now, hurt in a way Jack understood all too well. He looked at Rex, who was still standing in the same spot, staring into space. "I know how you feel, friend. I feel the same way, Lost," he muttered, more to himself than to the dog. That night, Jack left the bedroom door open, hoping that Rex would feel safe enough to approach. But when he turned off the lights, he heard the soft sound of paws on the floor. Rex didn't come to him, but lay down near the bedroom door, keeping a safe distance. Jack smiled to himself in the dark. It was a small step, but for him it was the beginning of something bigger. The next morning, Jack woke up to the soft sound of footsteps coming from the hallway. Rex was sitting near the door, ears pricked up, watching him silently. For a moment, Jack felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps something familiar was returning to the dog's mind. "Good morning, Rex," Jack said, stretching and forcing a smile. But the German Shepherd just looked away and slowly walked back to the corner of the room. Determined to rebuild their connection, Jack spent much of the day trying to interact with Rex. He picked up a tennis ball and threw it at the dog, but it didn't react. He placed a bowl of fresh food next to him, but Rex only approached after Jack left the room. Every attempt at proximity was met with cold silence. Jack felt the weight of the situation. Jack understood that the feeling of rejection was more than that. It was fear, distrust, perhaps even pain. That afternoon, he decided to try something different. He took out a worn-out military vest that he kept in an old box in his closet, the same one he wore during missions with Rex. As he put it on, the familiar smell of sand, sweat, and the battlefield hit him. "Let's see if you remember this, kid," he said, taking the vest to the backyard where Rex was. Rex looked at the vest curiously, tilting his head slightly. For a moment, Jack thought he had managed to awaken some memory. He threw the vest on the ground and stepped back, giving Rex room to approach. The German Shepherd sniffed the fabric, his nostrils flaring as he analyzed the scent. For a brief moment, his eyes seemed to lose their emptiness, but then he retreated, retracting himself with his tail low. Jack sighed, feeling hope fading once again. Sitting on the porch that night, Jack watched Rex lying in the yard, his eyes fixed on the stars. "I'm not going to give up on you," he said out loud, as if speaking to the wind. "You didn't give up on me when I needed you most, and I won't give up now." He knew he was asking a lot, but he also knew that the bond between them was still there, even if it was buried beneath layers of trauma. As the night grew colder, Jack decided to give Rex the space he needed. He went into the house, leaving the back door open, and went to bed. Hours later, the sound of paws scratching the floor woke him up. Looking at the foot of the bed, he saw Rex lying there, his eyes half closed. Jack said nothing, just smiled in the dark. The distance between them was closing. It was still small, but enough to reignite his determination. Over the next few days, small moments began to appear like cracks in the wall of distrust that separated Jack and Rex. On Monday morning, as Jack was chopping wood in the backyard, he noticed Rex watching him from a distance, his head inclined. The German Shepherd kept his tail low, but there was a subtle curiosity in his eyes. Jack paused for a moment, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and reached out to Rex. "Do you want to help, boy?" he asked in a playful tone. Rex didn't come any closer, but he didn't look away either. Later that day, while walking around the yard, Jack picked up a stick and lightly tossed it forward without waiting long. To his surprise, Rex took a few steps towards the object, stopped and then returned to where he was. Jack smiled. "Ah, so you remember how to play. You're just pretending not to." Despite Rex's timid response, that moment felt like progress. On Tuesday, Jack decided to take Rex for a walk. Rex's old dog tag was still in storage, so Jack cleaned it and attached it to his new collar. "Let's go for a walk," he said, adjusting the leash. Rex hesitated as Jack opened the gate, looking out as if the world beyond the fence was hostile. Still, with a gentle tug, Jack managed to convince him to walk. During the walk, Rex seemed tense, always alert. He was constantly sniffing the air and kept his body rigid, as if expecting imminent danger. Jack noticed this and spoke calmly, "You don't have to be like that, kid. We're safe here." He knew those words didn't mean much to Rex, but he hoped that, over time, the calm tone would start to make a difference. When they returned home, something unexpected happened. Jack was taking off Rex's collar when the dog approached and sniffed his hand. Jack stood still, feeling his heart racing. "That's right, Rex," he murmured, trying not to show too much emotion. He didn't move as Rex continued to explore his scent for a few seconds before pulling away again. To Jack, that small gesture seemed like a sign that something inside Rex was beginning to change. Rex was still tense, his distrust present in his every movement. Jack realized it was more than rejection, it was fear, distrust, maybe even pain. That afternoon, Jack decided to try something different. He picked up a worn-out military vest that he kept stored in an old box in his closet, the same vest he wore during missions with Rex. As he put it on, the familiar smell of sand, sweat, and the battlefield hit him. "Let's see if you remember this, kid," he said, taking the vest to the backyard where Rex was. Rex looked at the vest curiously, tilting his head slightly. For a moment, Jack thought he had managed to awaken some memory. He threw the vest on the ground and stepped back, giving Rex room to approach. The German Shepherd sniffed the fabric, his nostrils flaring as he analyzed the scent. For a brief moment, his eyes seemed to lose their emptiness, but then he retreated, retracting himself with his tail low. Jack sighed, feeling hope fading once again. Sitting on the porch that night, Jack watched Rex lying in the yard, his eyes fixed on the stars. "I'm not going to give up on you," he said out loud, as if speaking to the wind. "You didn't give up on me when I needed you most, and I won't give up now." He knew he was asking a lot, but he also knew that the bond between them was still there, even if it was buried beneath layers of trauma. As the night grew colder, Jack decided to give Rex the space he needed. He went into the house, leaving the back door open, and went to bed. Hours later, the sound of paws scratching the floor woke him up. Looking at the foot of the bed, he saw Rex lying there, his eyes half closed. Jack said nothing, just smiled in the dark. The distance between them was closing. It was still small, but enough to reignite his determination. Over the next few days, small moments began to appear like cracks in the wall of distrust that separated Jack and Rex. On Monday morning, as Jack was chopping wood in the backyard, he noticed Rex watching him from a distance, his head tilted. The German Shepherd kept his tail low, but there was a subtle curiosity in his eyes. Jack paused for a moment, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and reached out to Rex. "Do you want to help, boy?" he asked in a playful tone. Rex didn't come any closer, but he didn't look away either. Later that day, while walking around the yard, Jack picked up a stick and lightly tossed it forward without waiting long. To his surprise, Rex took a few steps towards the object, stopped and then returned to where he was. Jack smiled. "Ah, so you remember how to play. You're just pretending not to." Despite Rex's timid response, that moment felt like progress. On Tuesday, Jack decided to take Rex for a walk. Rex's old dog tag was still in storage, so Jack cleaned it and attached it to his new collar. "Let's go for a walk," he said, adjusting the leash. Rex hesitated as Jack opened the gate, looking out as if the world beyond the fence was hostile. Still, with a gentle tug, Jack managed to convince him to walk. During the walk, Rex seemed tense, always alert. He was constantly sniffing the air and kept his body rigid, as if expecting imminent danger. Jack noticed this and spoke calmly, "You don't have to be like that, kid. We're safe here." He knew those words didn't mean much to Rex, but he hoped that, over time, the calm tone would start to make a difference. When they returned home, something unexpected happened. Jack was taking off Rex's collar when the dog approached and sniffed his hand. Jack stood still, feeling his heart racing. "That's right, Rex," he murmured, trying not to show too much emotion. He didn't move as Rex continued to explore his scent for a few seconds before pulling away again. To Jack, that small gesture seemed like a sign that something inside Rex was beginning to change. That night, while Jack was preparing dinner, Rex lay down on the rug near the kitchen. It wasn't exactly an invitation for affection, but the closeness was enough for Jack to feel like they were on the right track. He looked at Rex and whispered, "Guess we're becoming friends again, huh?" Rex didn't respond, but his eyes seemed less distant, as if a part of him was finally recognizing the man who had once meant everything to him. It was a gray morning and fog covered the yard like a veil. Jack woke up early as he always did, but found Rex already awake, sitting by the living room window. The German Shepherd was looking outside, as if lost in thought. Jack approached carefully, feeling that each interaction with the dog was a test of his patience. "Remembering something, boy?" he asked softly, although he knew he wouldn't get an answer. After breakfast, Jack decided to bring something special for the day. From the back of the closet, he pulled out an old wooden box filled with items he had kept since his military discharge. Among the medals, photos, and letters was a worn-out toy, a rubber ball that Rex loved during his breaks in the field. Jack held her for a moment, feeling the weight of memories. So, he went to the backyard, where Rex was, and threw the ball on the ground near the dog. Rex looked at the ball, his body immediately tense. He sniffed the air as if the toy's scent brought back old memories. Jack watched, hopeful that the familiar object might help break the ice. Rex cautiously sniffed the ball, and for a moment it looked like he was about to grab the toy, but then he pulled away, still suspicious. Jack knew he would need more time and patience. He sat on the lawn, next to Rex, without trying to force interaction. Just being there, in each other's presence, was progress. He looked up at the cloudy sky and then at his old friend. "I'm not going to give up on you, Rex. We'll get through this together," he said calmly. Over the next few days, Jack continued the routine of trying to reconnect with Rex. I took him for daily walks, offered him snacks, and spoke to him in a calm, encouraging tone. Although progress was slow, every small advance, every moment of eye contact or closeness, was a victory for Jack. One afternoon, while Jack was sitting on the porch, Rex came up to him and laid his head in his lap. Jack lay still, feeling the heat of the dog's body and the gentle beat of his breathing. He knew there was still a long way to go, but that simple gesture meant Rex was starting to trust him again. Jack gently stroked Rex's head and whispered, "We're getting there, kid. One step at a time." The object carried a familiar scent, something buried in Rex's memories. For a few seconds, it looked like he was going to ignore him, but then he took a step forward. He tentatively sniffed the ball before stepping back again. Jack watched silently, noticing Rex's internal struggle. "You remember that, don't you?" he asked, almost begging. That day, something felt different. During lunch, Rex grew closer to Jack, following his every move. For the first time, he accepted food directly from Jack's hand. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, but he kept his emotions in check, moving slowly and carefully. The German Shepherd ate slowly, keeping his eyes fixed on Jack, as if he was beginning to trust him again. Later, Jack sat on the porch with the ball in his hand, twirling it between his fingers. "Remember when you brought me this in the middle of the night because you couldn't sleep?" He laughed softly, remembering how Rex insisted on playing even in moments of tension. "You were so stubborn, still are, I guess." Jack gently threw the ball across the yard, without waiting for Rex to react. To his surprise, the dog raised its ears and followed the ball with its eyes, although it did not catch it. That night, as Rex lay next to Jack's bed, the veteran felt the distance between them continue to close. It wasn't just physical closeness, something deeper was happening. They were both still trapped in their own pain, but now they were starting to share some of the burden. Before turning off the lights, Jack looked at Rex and said, "We're almost there, partner. We're almost there." The next morning, the sun shone brightly, spreading light across the yard. As Jack prepared for another day with Rex, he decided to try something new, recreating one of the old training routines they did on the battlefield. With a whistle around his neck and a rope in his hand, Jack hoped the exercise might awaken something in Rex's memory, something buried beneath trauma and time. "Let's take it slow, kid," Jack said as he walked to the center of the yard. Rex followed him at a safe distance, his eyes focused on his every movement. Jack whistled and gave a simple command, "Sit." For a moment, Rex lay still, but to Jack's surprise, he slowly lowered his body and sat up. "Good boy," Jack exclaimed, a mixture of surprise and excitement in his voice. Jack then picked up the rubber ball and threw it a little further. "Search, Rex," he called, trying to recreate the energy of the past. Rex hesitated, watching the ball as if weighing his options. Jack stood still, waiting patiently. After a few seconds, Rex took a few steps towards the ball, stopped, looked at Jack and finally caught it in his mouth. A shiver ran down Jack's spine. "You did it, kid." As Rex returned with the ball, something unexpected happened. He placed the object at Jack's feet and looked up, staring at him in a way Jack hadn't seen in years. There was something there, a spark of recognition, as if the German Shepherd was remembering who Jack was to him. The veteran felt his eyes water, but he maintained his composure. He didn't want to scare Rex with his emotions. That moment marked a turning point. For the rest of the day, Rex seemed closer, following Jack around the house and even allowing small gestures of affection. When Jack sat on the couch, Rex lay on the floor next to him, something he had never done before. It wasn't just the training or the familiar objects, it was as if, little by little, Rex was letting his guard down and allowing Jack to enter again. That night, as Jack was organizing his belongings, he found an old photo of him and Rex in the field, taken the day they completed a difficult mission. In the photo, they were both exhausted, but there was a gleam of pride in their eyes. Jack placed the photo on the table next to the bed and showed it to Rex. "Look at this, kid. We made a pretty good team, didn't we?" Rex looked at the photo for a few seconds before laying down next to Jack, closer than he had ever been since arriving at that house. The sound of distant thunder cut through the gray sky as rain began to fall over Jack's yard. He looked outside, noticing Rex standing near the porch, his nose pointed toward the horizon. It was as if the dog was in a trance, mesmerized by the dance of lightning and the patter of rain. Jack, holding a mug of coffee, slowly approached. "You always loved storms, remember?" he muttered more to himself. Rex turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting Jack's for the first time in weeks. There was something different in that look. It wasn't the complete barrier of mistrust that once separated them. It was hesitation, yes, but also a flicker of curiosity, a small sign that something inside Rex was changing. Jack's heart quickened. He knew there was still a long way to go, but moments like that gave him the strength to continue. Deciding to take advantage of the moment, Jack went to his closet and took out the old military whistle he kept along with other items from his service. He knew it was a risk, but perhaps the familiar sound would trigger a reaction in Rex. Returning to the porch, Jack blew 2 short blasts on the whistle, the same sound he usually used during training. Using the pattern he used during missions to call Rex back to his side, the German Shepherd turned sharply, ears pricked up in alert. For a moment, Jack almost believed that Rex would run to him like he usually did, but instead, Rex took just a timid step towards Jack before stopping again. The spark in his eyes faded, replaced by a shadow of doubt. He lowered his head, as if he was fighting something inside himself. Jack sighed deeply, putting away his whistle. He didn't want to force Rex to relive memories that could still be very painful. "It's okay, partner," he said reassuringly. "We'll go at your pace." Later, as the rain increased, Jack prepared a dry blanket and a bowl of fresh water for Rex. He placed the items in the corner of the room, but this time he chose not to press. He sat on the floor close to the dog, but without trying to get too close. Just being there was his way of showing Rex that he wasn't alone. Gradually, Rex began to relax, lying down on the rug and stealing glances in Jack's direction. As night fell, Rex did something that surprised Jack. He approached slowly, his heavy breathing echoing in the silence of the room. He stopped a few centimeters from Jack, who remained motionless, respecting the dog's space. Rex sniffed the air around the veteran, as if gathering the courage to do something monumental for him. Then, hesitantly, he gently touched Jack's hand with his nose. The touch only lasted a moment, but it was enough to make Jack's heart race. "You're coming back to me, boy," Jack whispered, voice thick with emotion. He didn't try to pet Rex, knowing that any sudden movement could break the fragile moment. He just stood there, letting the dog set the pace. When Rex finally pulled away, Jack felt a rush of relief and hope. It was a small victory, but for him, it carried the weight of a reconquest. That night, as the storm raged outside, Jack found Rex lying at the foot of his bed. The dog wasn't completely relaxed, but it didn't seem as distant as before. For Jack, that was all he needed, the reassurance that, despite all the trauma and pain, the bond between them still existed, waiting to be rebuilt. The sun rose brightly the next morning, casting a golden glow over the yard. Jack stood on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand, watching Rex walk slowly across the wet grass. There was something different that morning. Rex's movements were less tense, and for brief moments he looked less like a traumatized dog and more like the partner Jack remembered. Determined to continue making progress, Jack picked up the old whistle once more and held it in his hands. It was a risky test, but he was willing to try. But he knew he had to try. Jack blew 2 short whistles, the same ones he had used the night before. This time, Rex lifted his head almost instantly, his ears were pricked and his entire body seemed alert. Jack remained calm, showing no signs of haste or excessive expectation. "Come on, kid," he murmured encouragingly. To his surprise, Rex took a few steps towards him, his eyes fixed on the whistle. The veteran felt a lump in his throat when he saw the German Shepherd finally approaching with more confidence. Rex stopped in front of Jack, sniffing the air as if looking for something familiar. Jack, with slow movements, picked up the rubber ball he had used before. He held it in front of Rex for a moment and then gently tossed it to the side. For a brief second, the dog was still, but something seemed to change in its posture. With an unexpected burst of energy, Rex ran after the ball and brought it back, placing it at Jack's feet. The veteran stood still, feeling his eyes filling with tears. That simple act, so small but so significant, was proof that Rex was beginning to overcome his barriers. "That's right, buddy, I knew you were still there," Jack said, his voice breaking. He caught the ball again and repeated the gesture, and this time Rex ran faster, his tail wagging slightly as he returned. The progress felt almost magical, as if weeks of patience had finally paid off. For Jack, every step Rex took was a victory against the traumas they both carried. That night, for the first time since Rex had arrived, he lay down next to Jack on the couch, his head resting close to the veteran's leg. Jack didn't try to speak or move, he just stood there, letting the silence speak for itself. It was a moment of reconnection, a trust beginning to be restored, and as he gently stroked Rex's head, Jack knew that no matter how long it took, he would never give up on the friend who once saved his life. The morning began with the sound of birds in the backyard, but inside the house something even more significant was happening. Rex was in the center of the room, his gaze fixed on Jack, who was holding a collar in one hand and a military vest in the other. "Today's the big day, partner," Jack said with a hopeful smile. He had decided to take Rex to a special place, a nearby park that used to be their favorite place during their days off from training. It was a final test, a chance to see how far they had come. On the way to the park, Rex seemed more relaxed than ever. He was sitting in the back seat of the truck, his head slightly tilted out of the open window, letting the wind caress his face. Jack watched in the rearview mirror, feeling a sense of accomplishment and hope. It was a mix of pride and relief. For weeks, Jack had fought to bring back the dog that meant so much to him, and now this moment felt like a milestone. "Just like old times, huh?" Jack asked, without waiting for an answer. When they arrived at the park, Jack released Rex's collar and picked up the rubber ball again. The German Shepherd stood still for a moment, analyzing his surroundings, but instead of hesitating like before, he ran towards the ball as soon as Jack threw it. The two spent hours playing, as if time and trauma had never existed. Jack felt more and more that Rex was becoming the dog he knew, but at the same time he understood that they had both changed forever. They were no longer the same as before, but that didn't mean they couldn't build something new. In the late afternoon, as the sun set, Jack sat on one of the park benches and Rex lay down next to him, resting his head on his owner's leg. Jack looked at the horizon, feeling a sense of peace flood his chest. "I told you I wouldn't give up, Rex," he whispered, gently stroking the dog's head. For the first time in years, Jack felt like a part of him had been restored. Rex wasn't just a dog, he was a symbol of everything they had survived and overcome. As they walked home that night, Jack knew that the future, although uncertain, would be faced side by side with his partner. Rex, with his loyalty and courage, had found his way back to Jack's heart. And Jack, in turn, had learned that patience, love and determination could heal even the deepest wounds. They were whole again, ready to face whatever came next, together. Did you like this exciting story? If she touched your heart, please leave a like to support and don't forget to subscribe to the Stories That Touch the Soul channel to hear more touching stories like this. Your presence here really makes a difference.